I do want to extend a thanks again for choosing this session. I think it was the farthest walk from any other potential session, so kudos to you for making the walk. If you guys feel safe self-identifying, I want to start off with a real quick show of hands. So who would identify in this room as an extrovert? Okay. Now I don't know if the remainder would be introverts, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask who in here would identify mostly as being an introvert. All right, so my ballpark guesstimate's 50-50, so I'm really happy about that. I was worried that only introverts would show up, and there's a lot of valuable information here about extroverts as well. I want to start off by saying that this is quite literally a 3-year journey for me to be on stage talking about this topic. It all began a few years ago. I don't know if anybody actually saw Pat Waters' talk at LinkedIn Talent Connect about belonging. Did anybody? Well, very nice. Well, there's also links in this deck. You're probably going to get this deck sometime after the event. And there's over 20 links in the deck. A lot of it's supporting the research that I put into this, as well as videos like her talking about her speech where, you know, if you look at me, I don't really look like the typical diversity and inclusion person. I've always understood diversity and inclusion and the importance of it, but when I sat through her talk, it finally clicked because super short version of what she said was, when she was a child, she tried out for a baseball team. She was the only girl that tried out. She actually made the team, did really well, and then there was like a scuffle around the rules challenge and people saying, well, she's a girl, can she play? They had to check the rule books and said, actually, there's no rule that she can't play. So she was included on the team, but she didn't feel like she belonged on the team. At least initially, she wasn't treated equally, and it didn't feel like a good place for her to be, even though she was originally excited to be there. So this kind of got the idea in my head that I don't really understand, obviously I can't understand what it's like to be an underrepresented individual, but I do know what it feels like to not belong. And so it was during that session that I said, I think I finally have something I can tell my story to other people and maybe improve the situation of many other people. And then it was, well, actually first I want to say diversity and inclusion is not enough. If you guys don't agree with me, that's fine. There's other people out there around the world. This is a fantastic quote from Atlassian where they're basically saying diversity and inclusion is not enough. There's an HBR article as well from Pat where she talks about the fact that if the result isn't a feeling of belonging, then the diversity and inclusion was pointless anyway, kind of like what Pat said in her story. Moving on, there was a Talent Connect after that. Did anybody see Brene Brown talk? That was fantastic. Anybody purchase one of her books afterwards, which I did, yeah. So she basically got up on stage and talked about, she studies shame and vulnerability. And my takeaway from that talk was I need to put myself out there. So a year ago, I had an idea of maybe talking about this or sharing my story with the world. And then she basically got on stage and it's like, yeah, if you're thinking about stuff like this, you should put yourself out there. So I'm trying to put myself out there now. And I don't know if you guys know if this is even a thing. If you Google it, this happens apparently in a lot of places that, yeah, things are so bad when even the introverts show up to say it's an issue. In truth, Google it. There's hundreds of signs like this at events. What this all led me to do at around the 3-year mark was actually write an article, which I posted on LinkedIn. It tells my story. There's a link to it here. Has anybody actually read this story? Almost nobody. One person in the back, maybe a few people. You don't have to read it, but it's a longer version of what I'm going to talk about today, and I just wanted to throw it out there, and I have to admit I've gotten a lot of people reaching out to me saying that it was very impactful from a work perspective. I've had parents reach out to me actually on Facebook and say, now I actually understand my child, that there's nothing wrong with them. So that gives me goosebumps every time I say that, because it's making a difference. Is the whole reason why I'm up here talking about it. So if you haven't had a chance, go ahead and read it, and please share with other people that you think it would add value to. So what is introversion? We'll get into a definition in a minute, but I do want to share a little bit about my background and why I feel that I have a story to tell you guys. When I first started after college, my first job, I remember eating lunch in my car instead of in the break room and reading a book. I don't know, has anybody else done that? I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, because if people saw me, they'd probably think like, what's this antisocial jerk doing out here? Is he too good to eat lunch with us, right? But it just didn't feel right for me. It felt really awkward. I hate small talk. We'll talk about that. Seems to be kind of a common thing across introverts. Really enjoyed talking to the people I worked with in my lab room, but when you're like, hey, walk into a room and have small talk about the football game or some other pointless stuff, or at least pointless to an introvert, I just want to get to the deep conversations, right? But I had some challenges there. I became a relatively successful recruiter early in my career, and I had the owner of the company say in front of the group of people, I'm really surprised that you actually ended up working out because you're so quiet. You might not think that's a kind of a slap in the face, but the fact that I'm talking about it 21 years later tells you that it really felt like a slap in the face publicly to be called out for that. Like, why would you be successful? Because you're so quiet. Imagine if you filled in that blank with any other characteristic, it would be unacceptable. I've also been in situations where leadership meetings where I've had leaders say, that person's too much of an introvert, they're not leadership material. I've had countless conversations with leaders in my career that, hey, Glenn, you have awesome ideas, but you need to speak up more in meetings. And it wasn't until that long ago that I actually decided to speak up and say, well, it's the first time because I'm an introvert, that person actually said to me, don't say that term. I don't like that term. I was like, okay, I don't really know how you respond to things like that. So just trying to make it real for you that throughout my career, I've had a number of situations where it's been challenging for me, where I didn't really feel like I belonged because of who I am as an introvert. And everybody in here probably has some degree of understanding what introversion is. I'll go through some quick definitions. What's also kind of sad is that introversion really technically doesn't exist. It's really low extroversion, which shows that that's kind of the ideal in Western cultures, is extroversion is the good thing. And if you have low extroversion, thankfully other people said, well, it's got to have its own name, so it's introversion. People that are assertive, sociable, talkative, low extroversion, people that are introverted, they get energy from being by themselves. They can kind of get tired through a lot of social interactions. Some people, unfortunately, will think that they're self-absorbed or they're antisocial, which is not actually true. One thing I really wanted to drive home today is we're going to talk towards the end of my presentation about the fact that some of my research supports that introversion is actually within neurodiversity, which I think is hopefully will make people take it even more seriously. But you have to keep in mind that the big 5 personality traits, pretty much all the experts agree that they are hereditary, they're genetic, it's not something you get to choose. You're born with it primarily, so it's an inherent diversity characteristic. And just late in my presentation building, I wanted to throw this number in just for the US alone. Experts say that introverts are either 16 to 50% of the population. I shot for the middle, so around 33%. Now for the working age population in the United States, that's like 50 million people. So we're talking about a large number of people, but they still are in the minority. It's kind of obvious when I say it, and especially for the extroverts in the crowd, especially people in leadership positions. One thing you have to keep in mind is that introversion is essentially an invisible trait. You can't just look at somebody and know, although sometimes you can see in certain situations that you might think that they're an introvert, but like I said before, nobody's ever said that in my career. They just told me that I don't speak up enough in meetings. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I just want to drive the point home. This isn't just about introversion. It's about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and the fact that introversion cuts across all genders, gender identities, races, ethnicities, and ages. So it impacts a lot of people. And anyone who's already dealing with the challenge in any other characteristic, if you add introversion on top of it, there's some studies that show that it really is kind of a double or a triple whammy. So just to be aware of that. So this is, I thought, a really good definition for introversion. And one of the things I wanted to point out about this is that it's often misconstrued as shyness. Now, I happen to have a psychology degree. I don't have a master's or a PhD or anything, but as an armchair psychologist of types, shyness is not the same as introversion. Introversion is also not social anxiety. They're not the same thing. And it's not social phobia or even avoidant personality disorder, right? I can socialize with people just fine. I just have issues going from the small talk or even getting to small talk in the first place to get to that deep end of the conversation. So how many people have actually seen this YouTube video or TED Talk? Only a handful of people? I'm really glad I'm sharing it today because you guys should watch it. It's like the abbreviated version of her book, which I'm going to show you very shortly. It's Susan Cain. Some real quick takeaways, common to introverts. So for the half of the people, hopefully most people are saying, yes, I totally get you. Although you can't bucket everybody and say all of these apply to all introverts, right? You just can't. It's not like a broad stereotype. But there's usually a strong aversion to small talk. It's because it feels fake, and it just doesn't feel genuine. They tend to think before they speak. They tend to think a little bit slower than extroverts. They take more time to process things. They tend not to self-promote as much as their extroverted peers. Quiet, minimally stimulating environments, and they often favor working on their own. And again, generalities, not saying it applies to all. I really enjoyed putting this one together because in this slide, it basically shows what some of the strengths are associated with introverts versus some of the challenges that they face. Strengths of introverts, empathy and inclusion, like being aware of other people and how they're feeling. I don't know if other introverts in the room feel this, but I feel like I can really get a sense of a conversation. I can read people really well, whether they're really interested in talking to me or not. A lot of nonverbal cues I just pick up on immediately, and I've talked to other introverts and they seem to be, it's a trend. Writing also, does anybody any introverts write really long emails? Right? And then you have managers who are like, stop writing me long emails, just send me like a one-liner or pick up the phone. Because that's happened to me a lot. But you know what? I actually get to think a lot more when I write. And it helps me to communicate all of my thoughts better than in a conversation where I may not be able to keep up with somebody who thinks a little faster than me. And then I feel like I'm at a disadvantage. And it's kind of funny when I'm like, well, if I'm going to share my whole big picture thinking with you via email, but then you're going to basically shut me down and say you can't communicate through writing. That's another form of, again, it's unconscious, but it feels a little bit discriminating. And on the challenges, we already talked about small talk. Small talk is something that's bad. Schmoozing is something they're not really good at. Advocating for themselves is not something they tend to do. It's unfortunate. People think that they're socially awkward or just antisocial in general. They tend to be slower thinkers. And I have some neurodiversity research to basically back that up. Meeting and social fatigue, open office environments, generally not the best place for introverts. And this is another personal one for me. As a leader, sometimes people look at you to organize team events. I suck at that. I will never be good at it. I always find the extrovert in the room and I'm like, you can do that. And they're like, yes, I'm gonna. But the problem is they always design these things for the extroverts. So when the introverts show up, you feel like this doesn't feel like the right event for me. And that's another thing we'll talk about, because at the end I'll have a lot of practical things that you can go back to your companies and say, hey, we can implement these things immediately to make a more inclusive environment to help introverts feel like they belong and they can be their authentic selves at work. So 2 books, if you're really interested in introversion, and again, you don't have to be an introvert to be interested in introversion. You can be an extrovert too to understand your counterparts. Quiet is one of the really big name books that people are familiar with, but this other one is another one I would add to your library, The Introvert Advantage. And again, I have links through all of these. You can Google them and find them. One main point I want to drive home around introversion and extroversion is that most people think it's binary. It's not. It's actually a spectrum. And for full disclosure, I'm pretty far down on the introversion spectrum, just self-admittedly. Some people are more towards the middle. You've heard of the new term ambivert. It's legit. People can sometimes be a little bit more introverted and sometimes more extroverted, but when you start getting down the introvert spectrum, you kind of lose almost all of your ability to be an extrovert. And if anybody's wondering, because I went to dinner with a group last night, and they're like, well, how do you get up on stage and talk to people? And I'm like, this isn't small talk. I'm talking about something I'm passionate and interested in. And some of you might actually come up to me afterwards and engage me in a conversation about the same topic. We don't have to try to do the whole small talk thing. We get to jump right into the deep meat of a conversation. So speaking in front of people, again, social anxiety, shyness, things like that's not the same thing. So what is it like to be an introvert? Many of you in the room know this, but I want to share a few things with you that I found some of it's actually quite disturbing. So I Googled the word introvert, and if you go to the bottom 3, I'll be honest, I know some of these other sessions score really high on results because they're really like comedic and fun. This is a serious topic though. It is ironic, right? But when I did this and I read it, it made me sad. Do you guys know why these results come up? It's because lots of other people have been searching for it. Again, it's hard not to get a little emotional when people are like, how can I stop being who I am? It doesn't feel good to feel that way. So I'm not trying to bring you guys down, just trying to be serious about it and be like, this isn't just surface level fluff. This is what people feel sometimes on a daily basis at work. This is a personality assessment. I'm not going to name the company that it came from. I pointed it out to them, and what does it immediately kind of hit you in the face say? Right? You want to be high on emotional stability. You want to be high on openness and conscientiousness, but if you're low on extroversion, does that unconsciously come across as a positive or a negative? It's negative. You want to be high on all those things. So again, on a serious note, in doing research, Psychology Today basically says that introversion, a lot of people say that it's perceived as less socially desirable than extroversion. And the book that I pointed out a few slides ago, 98% of introverts felt that they had been reproached or maligned for being who they are. It's a pretty high percentage. And again, this is more Western culture, so I know we have people that are global in here. It doesn't really necessarily apply all around the world, and in fact, some cultures are where introversion is somewhat more of the norm, right? So they wouldn't be in the minority and experiencing any kind of differential treatment. But in Western cultures, they're saying close to 90% of people say, I want to be more extroverted. And I can say I've been one of those people. And again, there's a part of me that actually feels ashamed to say it now. I still want to be, because life looks easier to other people. It looks easier to me when you're an extrovert. I've worked with extroverts that seem to work the channels. They're great at schmoozing with people that work. Everybody seems to like them. I'm not like them. That doesn't mean I don't bring value to the company, and that goes back to everybody knows all the financial statistics around diversity. It's not just ethically something you should care about, but from a business perspective, more diverse companies tend to outperform less diverse companies. Well, the diversity isn't just how you look on the surface, it's also diversity of thought. And introversion brings a lot of that to the table, again, cutting across all of the other diversity traits. So, again, more of what it's like to be an introvert, especially for the extroverts in the room that really can't relate. Just like I said, I can't relate to being a woman. I'm a man, right? If you're an extrovert, you can't really know what it's like to go through life being an introvert. And a lot of introverts actually don't self-identify at work because it feels like a stigma and that you'll be labeled and then you're lesser than. But when you read some of these comments on Susan Cain's YouTube video for her TED Talk, right? If you don't talk a lot, people think you're incompetent. Right? Everybody's always told me I'm too quiet, I need to speak more. I've always felt like I was in the wrong. And this last one, this is a little bit of humor. It's okay to laugh at this one. I thought it was great. Society, be who you are. Do whatever makes you happy. Introvert, sure. Society, no, not that way, like this, only like this. Another interesting thing I found was actually there's an Indeed forum where a bunch of introverts had created a thread where they were talking about experiencing discrimination in the workplace. And here are two of the more salient quotes, right? One manager told me my personality was wrong. Again, I had someone tell me that don't use that word. Like it's a bad word. There's a stigma attached to it. And this person feeling hopeless because they basically said, the manager's saying, you're never going to be promoted. Again, I've been in meetings with senior leaders where they've said this person is not leadership material because they're an introvert. And you can guess who said that. Not another introvert, it was an extrovert. And it's the affinity bias of the assumption that you have to be a certain way to advance or bring value to an organization. And it is unconscious, right? So I admit that. I don't think anybody's actually going out of their way to be cruel and punish introverts, but it's something that if you're not aware of it, you can't do anything about it. So this is really funny. I had somebody, after I wrote the article, reach out to me and share some interesting things with me. One was a slide full of actual review marks, and then this person decided to flip it and say, well, would you ever make these same review comments about an extrovert? And the answer is no. It's actually kind of silly, right? I know Jen is an extrovert. She needs to be careful because sometimes she comes across as too gregarious, right? And no one's going to say that. But we have a manager. This is an actual review line. You need to be careful. Don't use that as an excuse to be awkward. And to say you're awkward is a judgment anyway. Who gets to say who's awkward? I think sometimes extroverts don't really know how to take introverts, and so they immediately label them. So I came across something, it was on HP's website, and it was fantastic, and I was going to use that because it basically had the same thing, but I'm not saying HP has nothing to do with introversion or personality diversity, but I really wanted to drive the point home here is when I saw the HP thing and it said essentially, hey, just bring you, just be you, bring your talent. So that, and you're going to come into an environment where you can feel like you belong. And when I saw that, I said, yes, I think that's honestly what all companies should be doing, right? Regardless of whatever your diversity characteristic is. But I can say in my career, I've never actually felt that I can actually just be me and that I will be accepted for who I am and that I can be myself and identify without people kind of stigmatizing me. So this is the goal, but I don't think it's delivered on nearly enough, and it doesn't feel like it, and again, I can only tell my story, but it doesn't feel like it's been that way for me throughout my career. So here's another fun part. So this is a really good Deloitte study, and again, links all throughout this deck when you get it, so you can go and explore them to your heart's content. More than half of people feel pressure to cover, meaning they have to try to, at work, come across as someone that they're not. So that's being inauthentic. And you know, everybody talks about diversity and inclusion and belonging. You should be able to bring your authentic self to work. Well, if more than half of your people feel like they have to cover, then you're not achieving your goal. Some people said, hey, when I do this and I try to cover, it actually undermines my sense of self. It also makes them start to resent the organization and their commitment. So this ties back to employee engagement. So people know this, but I just want to drive the point home. You know, if you don't feel safe to bring your authentic self to work, that has repercussions. And something that's very specific to introverts is that studies have shown that introverts that try on purpose to act very extroverted, to cover, it actually has negative repercussions. It backfires. There's lots of people that probably think that you can just change who you are and it's your personality, but if you actually look up what personality is, it is who you are. It is something you're born with. It's not something you really change. So if you're going to have to go into situations and act like someone you're not, then it has negative repercussions psychologically for you. So a couple of really disturbingly eye-opening things that I found in my research was that it seems like extroverts really dominate leadership. And what I want you to focus here is on the blue, right? So they're saying the general population is probably up to around 50% low extroversion, which equals introversion. And just look at it, this was published in the Wall Street Journal, just look at it go down to top executives or even executives or middle-level managers. We're talking 5%, low single digits. And if you're like me, you start to wonder, how is this happening? Does anybody want to try to throw out why they think this happens? I'll try to leave time at the end for Q&A. Does anybody want to know why? Is anybody brave enough to throw out why they think this happens? Why does it get so skewed? Do you think it's because introverts can't be good leaders? There's actually studies that show that introverts can outperform extroverts with very self-directed teams. Shoot.
I think that probably as you move up a little bit more, you have to do things that touch your values. And I think most of the introverts that I know, the things that they don't allow people to do is touch their values.
So what she's saying for people on the stream is that she's saying that as you move up, people might actually have to move away from their values, and introverts are typically not the people that will do that. Yeah. I also think affinity bias really plays into it. People like advancing people that like themselves. And I don't know if you guys have had, 2-decade careers and you've watched other people, and sometimes you have to, again, I'm channeling Brene Brown's message to me. I'm just throwing it out there. I've looked at people and I've wondered, why is that person promoted? Why is that person promoted over that person? Or why is it not me? Why am I not getting those chances compared to those other people? And again, all anecdotal, but a lot of times the pattern is how likable they are. And they're typically incredibly social, they're good at schmoozing, and it doesn't mean they're not good at their job, but they may not be the best person for the job, but other people feel that way. And if the leaders are already that way, it's unconscious affinity bias. You like people similar to yourself. And I feel that sometimes in my experience that I unnerve extroverts with my introversion. Sometimes it feels awkward when it shouldn't feel awkward. And again, I think it's unconscious. Here comes the real zinger. There's 2 links on this slide. One is a podcast, one is an article, and this is across multiple countries. Studies have shown that introverts don't earn as much as extroverts. Extroverts can actually, over their lifetime, earn up to $500,000 a year more. And you have to start wondering, why is that? Won't have all the answers during this session to move on, but I just want to drop that heavy question on you, because if you're getting promoted less and there's less introverts, it's disproportionately minimized in terms of leadership, and they're making less money. Something systematically is going on. And it is kind of sad that it's 2019 and we're like, personality is something that psychologists have known about for 50, 60, close to 70 years. And we're just now shining a light on the differences here. So neurodiversity, to jump into this, most people in this room, you probably came here, you probably know what neurodiversity is. It's basically saying that neurological differences should be recognized like other diversity characteristics. And for the most part, people would say that introverts and extroverts are considered neurotypical, and that means, they're not considered in the same group as, say, Asperger's or autism. But very small font on the lower right-hand corner, there's actually one researcher who has a theory that when you go really far down the introversion spectrum, you're actually starting to touch upon the autism spectrum. And again, there's not a lot of research in that space, and I hope that there is more. What that means, personally, I don't actually know, but I think that's very interesting that there's already some researchers that are thinking along those lines, that maybe introversion isn't just the opposite of extroversion. So a couple of things that I learned, again, trying to get some research that supports the fact that this could really be a neurological thing. We know personality is something you're born with. It's an inherent trait. But there was a study published in the Journal of Neuroscience in 2012 that showed that introverts have different brains, typically, than an extrovert. And those areas are around decision-making and abstract thought. And out of one of the books that I referenced a little bit earlier, this was very interesting. So we had a doctor that did PET scans of brains of introverts and extroverts, and it showed that the blood flow within introvert brains was different than the dominant blood flow in extrovert brains. Does anybody have any idea which one of these is the introvert brain and which one is the extrovert? I'm the kind of person that doesn't call out answers either because I'm nervous I'm going to be wrong. It's okay. I'll just show you, right? So, the longer, more complex pathway associated with acetylcholine neurotransmitter is the introvert, and the shorter, less complicated path and more associated with the dopamine, which again, social stimulation. Some people get a lot of energy from the social stimulation. This kind of makes sense. And some of the things on the bottom in terms of parts of the brain that are associated with those areas. This may lend itself to why a lot of introverts will say, I think slower than other people. I don't process things immediately. I need time to think about things. I come up with really good ideas, but it's never off the top of my head. So sometimes meetings happen, and this has happened to me many times. So by a show of hands, not just to support me, just tell the truth in your experience. Have you ever been in meetings where the conversations are dominated by, whether you label them or not, extroverts? There's never a break in the conversation. You try to interrupt and get your words out. You never get in because people keep bouncing along. The conversation moves beyond the point you wanted to make, and it becomes awkward to say, well, I want to go back to like 5 minutes ago and raise my point. And you're just like, screw it, I'm not going to say anything. That is a lot of hands, okay? That goes against diversity. If you're talking diversity of thought and those people aren't even allowed to speak their diverse thoughts, your organizations are losing. And I have some practical considerations to address that. So again, making my case on the neurodiversity. Again, I'm not alone, but it seems to be somewhat new, and there's not many people pushing in this space. But I think the neurological differences between introverts and extroverts, which is something you're born with, it results in differences in how they think and behave. Again, making the case for neurodiversity. And I just think they should be considered on par with anything else, to be honest, especially since it powers the diversity of thought, which is where a lot of the actual value of diversity comes from. You have people from different backgrounds, right? And they bring diversity that way. Well, introverts bring diversity in terms of how they even process information and how they think about things. And sometimes many introverts, if you're going to use some stereotypes, is that they they're able to synthesize bigger picture things and kind of see things sometimes that other people can't. And I definitely identify with that. So let's get to the section where we're going to talk about what can you do, right? So I want to set the stage and say, hey, this is really important. You guys in your organizations should be able to do something about it. So what can you do? Well, I have a whole bunch of practical things that you can go back and do. The first thing, though, I wanted to start off with, a tiny bit of humor, is what not to do. Please do not ask people, why are you so quiet? What's wrong? I can't tell you how many times I've had people ask me in work settings, around coworkers. It calls me out and it makes me uncomfortable. And it's almost kind of like, imagine if you inserted any other trait. Why are you so feminine? It's bizarre because you're basically saying, well, that's who I am, right? We just had all these meetings and I just need to be quiet for a minute. But when you say that, it comes across awkward, and extroverts are like, I don't understand that. So I've actually never done that because I don't want to have the awkward conversation. But I should be able to say, it's who I am. I just need to recharge a little bit. So being quiet doesn't have to be awkward. Just let me process today, right? And just calm down. We'll chat again a little bit later, that's fine. But also don't ask people what's wrong. I know sometimes you're like, hey, you should be able to ask people what's wrong because I'm genuinely concerned. But I would say 99.99% of the time, nothing is actually wrong. Nothing happened in their family, right? It's just who they are. And if you're an extrovert, you might be reading their silence and it makes you uncomfortable. So you end up asking those questions and it actually makes that person feel more uncomfortable. So don't do that. So what to do? Lots of things, actually. So I'm just going to basically say yes. I love the question in the beginning. Personality needs to be more prominently displayed in your diversity, inclusion, and belonging efforts in your companies. You should definitely have training. It should be in those trainings for all employees, but I think there should be a specific focus on anyone that you might have sourcers or recruiters or specifically hiring managers. Okay? A big part of that is to tackle affinity bias. And I have some interviewing tips in the next couple slides. This is something I've struggled with my entire life, is the after-work activities. I don't know if any other introverts dread them. Sometimes you probably like to be invited, but you don't want to go. I mean, there's so many comics. There's a lot of introverted comics online, and a lot of it is around things like that. Well, it kind of bothers me if you don't invite me, but I'd rather not go. But if it's mandatory, and the types of people who love those types of situations with the networking and the mixing and people you don't know, that is like an extrovert's paradise. Like, they go in and they operate. They can work the room. I can't do it. I've tried for many years, and one of the things that I've learned in research is that you have to accept who you are. But it's tough to accept who you are when it feels like other people around you don't accept who you are. So if you're the one person that's in the corner looking at their phone, right? Glen's over there, he's antisocial. If it's an executive, like, well, he's got to be good at work in the room, right? A lot of those stereotypes are still existent today. That hurts introverts. So after-work activities, while mandatory, if you do, and again, I don't have time to cover it today, but I do think conferences and after-work activities, there are ways that you can design them that they can be more inclusive for extroverts and introverts. That might be like a separate post or a talk, or if anybody has any ideas, I would love to hear from you. This might call some people out. I know some introverts like me for many years never even actually uttered the word introvert in their work environment because I was afraid to actually say it because I was worried that I would be labeled and it would somehow limit my career path. Just being honest. But if you don't know what people's personality characteristics are, you can't appreciate it, you can't recognize it, you can't do something about it. So you may want to consider using these types of assessments in your organization as long as you can guarantee that it's never going to be used in a way where it actually systematically discriminates against those people and labels them in a negative way. Meetings. Again, dinner conversation last night was fantastic. A guy, without me even telling him what I was talking about, he's like, in meetings, conversation moves past, I never get a chance to speak up, don't get a chance to share. It's a missed opportunity. There was a really interesting study of a large bank, and this wasn't just introversion or extroversion. It basically said, hey, when you have a contribution to make in a meeting, how often are you always able to make that? Now, this has to do with all people. 35% said all the time. And again, your organizations suffer if you're basically having a meeting where you should be talking about what is everybody thinking, what are people's best ideas, and if 2/3 of the time the ideas come out, again, your organization loses. And when it comes to meetings that can be more inclusive of introverts, you definitely have to have a moderator. I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings where extroverts dominate. They're not doing it on purpose, but people let it happen. And you shouldn't put the introverts in the position where they're the ones that have to out-extrovert the extroverts that are dominating with no break. Some people start talking before the other person ends. And I'm just gonna tell you straight, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, but I don't like doing that. I shouldn't have to interrupt somebody to get my point out. So unless you have somebody controlling the flow of the conversation, that could be a negative. Call on people who haven't spoken yet. It's really helpful when you can notice that, hey, there's been 3 people that haven't contributed. Get them towards the end. Give them more time to process. They may be sitting on ideas, and it's okay even if it's going back earlier in the conversation. It's something I've actually gotten better now too, where I've just had to speak up and be like, I know the conversation has moved on, but I actually have really a valuable thing to share about something we talked about 10 minutes ago, and I just go ahead and throw it out just to make sure I share it. Don't allow people to interrupt other people. Don't force people to interrupt others. This is a huge one. I stumbled this on my own years ago. Send out pre-reads. You know, I don't know if you've ever been in meetings where the meeting is going through the PowerPoint or things like that. Years ago, I'm like, this is stupid. We should send the PowerPoint out beforehand. Everybody looks at the PowerPoint. You come to the meeting to discuss, not go slide by slide. That also allows the introverts time to consume the information, process it, come to the meeting ready to share. Because if you're going slide by slide, again, same thing can happen. They can be left behind as you move on. And then sometimes they're like, well, I'm just not going to share because I have an idea on slide 5 and now we're on slide 20. Meeting summaries afterwards can be massive to basically allow people to say, look, if you're like me, sometimes your best ideas come after the meeting. But if there's no mechanism to be able to collect that, again, your organization is missing out on good ideas. Group work, brainstorming is absolute hell for introverts. Always has been for me. Extroverts in my group always dominate. I end up being kind of quiet. And again, it takes me time to process the information. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the term brain writing. It's interesting, there's a link in here. It's essentially in the first few minutes or however long you want to do it in a brainstorming session where you're trying to get ideas from everybody, is that nobody talks, everybody writes ideas down on Post-its and they actually pass them around and there's no name on them. And eventually people are saying, they add things like yes and. Right? So they take someone's idea and they continue on it, or how might we, and then you have people add all the ideas and no names are on it, so it's not about who contributes, and you give the introverts some time to actually think it through rather than it being dominated by extroverts. And again, I'm not trying to be negative on extroverts, I'm just saying I've been in these situations and I often feel like I don't get a chance to contribute. Interviewing, this is actually from a LinkedIn article. I quoted it because these quotes are brilliant. It was actually Bruce Anderson that said this, and it basically said that most interviews are geared towards extroverts. They favor extroverts. And you may not really think about that, but if you're confident, charismatic, fast-talking, not just fast-talking like BS, but I mean like really quick thinker, it tends to impress people. I'm still impressed by people who think quickly. I've worked with executives who think probably 4 times faster than me. And I'll be honest with you, there's some times where I feel like this person probably thinks that I'm not very smart or that I don't have anything to add, because if I can't keep up and I don't have something to say quickly in return, maybe the impression I'm making is I got nothing. And I hate that. I don't want to be perceived that way. You know, I should be able to follow up with my ideas. More on interviewing. Again, this is massive. It's not about how social or awkward they are, but you know what? We're human. Even if it's video interviewing, sometimes you like the people who come across that are more outgoing because it is just how it is. And that's why people like me and other introverts are probably like, yeah, if I had a magic wand and I could be more extroverted, why wouldn't I be? Right? Because it can help you. But you're not hiring people for small talk or their ability to schmooze and make a connection with the interviewer. It has nothing to do with that. You're actually hiring people who can do the job, not people that can make a good impression on an interview in terms of how well they talk. The eye contact is huge also. I don't know if you guys are aware, or even as introverts you're aware, that very often when you're talking, you're not actually making eye contact with people. I become very aware of it, and I just tell people. But you know, eye contact is a big deal. You know, even interview coaching is about making eye contact. And it's basically saying, hey, go against your natural instinct to kind of look away, and as you're processing, you're talking. I do it all the time. Video interviews, I think, is something, especially if you use any AI, video interviewing solutions, you might want to be careful about that, because I know one of the factors they tend to look at has to do with maintaining eye contact or camera contact. And make sure your hiring managers are prepped for affinity bias. They shouldn't just hire people like them, especially if your hiring managers are extroverts, which I showed you in a previous slide. There's a lot of companies that have extroverts dominating those positions. Interviewing, some people have a problem with this suggestion, but I have some examples of how Facebook is doing this specifically for software engineers, not on introversion, but giving people a chance to know, what am I going to ask you? So that an introvert doesn't have to come into the situation and immediately try to think of the best answer off the top of their head, when that may put them at a disadvantage. If you send out the types of things that you're going to be talking about, that gives them a chance to prep. Why wouldn't you want them to do the best they can? Is it about, this quote on the bottom is great, the whole unconscious belief that smart people think on their feet? It's not true. There's no correlation between, how fast you can come up with an idea with how smart or how good your idea is. So you have to accommodate these things during the interviewing process. I want to make sure I have time to talk about this. This is one of the very positive things that came out of the post that I wrote back in February. I had a gentleman by the name of Ryan Showalter reach out to me. He works for a company called 8451, which, if you don't know, is kind of the data and analytics arm of Kroger. If anybody's familiar with Kroger. Well, he created a community. So shortly after February, he reached out and he engaged me, and he's like, hey, I've actually got this group, and I call it Itopia. It's kind of like utopia and I for the introvert. And he has a vision, he has a mission, and it started out with 2 people, just 2 people. And you want to know the reason why it started off so small is because he had a hard time finding people who admit that they were introverted and that they needed to talk about these things. So it's kind of like an employee resource group. It now has over 60 people. Here's how it works in terms of the pods. It's essentially a safe environment where introverts and extroverts can work together. It's not dissimilar to other employee resource groups for different groups, but it helps shine a light on the difference between introversion and extroversion and how we can create a better environment for 8451. And I'm very proud of Ryan because his work in 8451 got the attention of the CHRO and Chief Diversity Officer at Kroger. I think he's going to be in a panel internally on it. This is something, I'm getting close on time, but this is one of the most brilliant things that he shared with me. It's basically what he calls flipping the script, and this is for reviews for people that are introverts. When managers say you don't speak up enough, right? You don't seem engaged during meetings, or I'm unaware of your perspective and I want to hear it. What's really interesting is you see these are super practical pieces of advice to give the hiring managers so they understand how does this actually impact the introvert, right? And guess what? What does it feel like to the introvert? The frequency that I speak up is a measure of how valuable I am. That really resonated with me because a lot of times people say, hey, you need to speak up more. Well, part of it is maybe we need to run meetings differently so I actually can speak up more, right? But my value isn't, do I out-talk everybody? And are you checking tick marks? And did Glenn speak in this meeting? Did Glenn speak in this meeting? Right? So really interesting guide that he has there, and very proud of the fact that 8451 has actually put it up prominently on their own website under their diversity and inclusion section. They have a whole page dedicated just to introversion and extroversion, so personality. Diversity. So wrapping up, if you're an introvert, there's a few things that I would like to pass on to you. I know sometimes we don't have the luxury of choosing our workplace with care or having a sense of whether or not the company or even the group that you're going to be reporting into is introvert friendly. I don't think there are many right now that are purposely designed to be that way. But to be quite honest, that's why my 3-year journey has led me to be on the stage and talk about it, because I want more people talking about this so we can shine a light on it, so we can impact millions of people. Literally millions of people, I hope, are positively impacted by more people shining a light on the difference in personality of introversion and extroversion. Indicators of introversion-friendly work environment, probably not surprising, right? Can you work remote? I work remote a lot. I really work well remote, right? Making time for yourself is important. Spaces to work alone. I know a lot of places it becomes the joke, right? The open work environment can be challenging for introverts. It's not impossible to work in that environment. I have too, but sometimes I've resorted to putting headphones on to kind of tell people I'm busy, I need a block of time to think about things and work on it. Block your calendar. I still am not good enough at that. Because otherwise, if you end up having meeting after meeting after meeting, it drains the crap out of you, and you don't really have a lot of time to sit back and process and reflect and then create valuable content or come up with new ideas. And I actually plan on writing an article on this last one, which is seeking leaders who are givers and not takers. Has anybody seen Adam Grant's video on that? There's a link in here, just Google it. It's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's my own hypothesis is that I think many extroverts are unknowingly takers, and I think that introverts are unknowingly givers. I'll just leave it at that. Do your own research there and be on the lookout. Maybe I'll talk about it sometime in the future, but it's probably some of the best career advice I can give you. So key takeaways, just to wrap up. Just remember, introversion is not a choice. It's not something somebody can go read a self-help book and just fix themselves for the extroverts in the room. Again, I'm not picking on you, but if you don't understand what it's like, just trying to paint a picture so you can get a better sense. The stat is they're outnumbered 2 to 1. And it cuts across all genders, ages, gender identities, races, and ethnicities. And sadly enough, some studies have shown that extroverts out-earn introverts, and that extroverts tend to get promoted more often and dominate leadership positions, and I feel that sometimes that creates that vicious cycle of affinity bias. And lastly, introvert brains are different than extrovert brains. I think that's kind of the basis of neurodiversity, right? When it comes to the definition, I think that you need to be including introversion, extroversion into your DIBS efforts. This is a long list, right? But your workplace, your meetings, your activities, your interviews, your hiring, your reviews, your promotions need to be inclusive of introverts. And my final call to action is that you really need to help your organizations create a culture where introverts can feel like they belong and they can bring their authentic selves to work and add the unique value that they can bring. And that's all I have.